Hey, Genelle, how are you? Congratulations, you've nailed it.
Yes, you have.
So keep on traveling.
Hey, you know what? It has been an honor that every time someone mistakes me for you over our 20 zillion years that we've been friends, honestly, for everything you stand for, who you are, what you look like on the inside and out, it is such an honor to be mistaken for you.
And one of the great wisdom sayings comes from you. All ministry is relational. Thanks for teaching us that.
That's right. And at the end of the day, any place you go, I'm pretty sure you hear something that, like, just everyone knows who you are.
Where everybody knows Genelle's name. Bum, 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 bum. And they're always glad Genelle came. Bum, 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 bum.
Have an awesome sabbatical, Genelle. Congratulations.
Yay.
Hi, I'm Claudia Ginkinger. This is Genelle's mother speaking, and I want to begin by telling you the long legacy of ancestors who were faithful disciples of Christ that helped pave the way for this celebration. Early memory was when Genelle and the Kansas University campus pastor came to Iowa on their way to Luther Seminary in St. Paul for a tour. John said to the pastor, "Well, it will be a cold day in hell when one of my children is a pastor, especially this one," pointing to Genelle. The next day was the coldest day on record in Iowa. Genelle started seminary that next June. I was impressed that Genelle's call committee at Calvary didn't just interview her, but they stuck with her as a support team for years after. That warmed my heart to know they wanted her to succeed in this pastoral role. John and I drove Johnny, Genelle's nephew, up to Bemidji every summer to attend VBS at Calvary. We called Genelle's first house the Minnie Mouse House. Many memories coming up to the summers and enjoying Bemidji. Then came Chad, and soon came after Catherine and Jake. We were able to come and be a part of all the traditions, how the church supported and celebrated these milestones with them. In 2009, we had just been up to Calvary for Genelle's installation when John unexpectedly passed away. Calvary decided to honor his memory by donating money to the new gym floor at Calvary. John's gym got a lot of traction, and I am still very honored by that act of kindness and generosity. I was blessed to be able to travel with Genelle to some of the events she led through ELCA Senior Pastor Conferences. Watching her lead and be acknowledged for her gifts is always a joy. Genelle is working at most of our family gatherings, whether it is presiding at a wedding, a baptism, a funeral, or just saying a prayer. I take pride in her work, even when she is technically on vacation. Sharing her with you all of the major holidays was an adjustment. We had to rework our expectations and celebrations so she could serve you all well. I was honored to be in Moorhead the weekend of the bishop election when Genelle was nominated. I was very impressed with her ability to express her vision and goals and see her energy for God's church. I have made many friendships over the past 20 years with the people of Calvary Lutheran in Bemidji. This is my church, home away from home. I always feel welcome and a part of the ministry here. I am grateful for being a part of Calvary's ministry through my daughter, Genelle.
Oh, hi! Hi, friends at Calvary Lutheran Church. It's Genelle, and go Hawks. I'm going to spend some time just reflecting a little bit on my first impressions of coming up to Bemidji and remembering back with you some of what I remember in those early days back in 2001. The first thing I remember is people giving me warm clothes to wear. I thought to myself, I lived in St. Paul. I mean, how much colder can it be? I learned a lot in those first years. I remember coming up here, driving up for my interview, and when I drove by Calvary, I thought it looked like a storm shelter, and I needed a place to kind of go and change clothes before my interview from driving up to St. Paul. So I went to that McDonald's by the lake, and as I was changing in the bathroom, I was trying to rehearse kind of who I was and who I wanted to communicate being, and in that time of meeting my call committee, just a wonderful group of people, and them supporting me in my first year, I learned things like that having a pair of long johns is not just a thing you should do, but the thing that you need to do in order to watch like a fall football game. I remember learning from the confirmation kids that snowmobiles are called sleds up here, and I kept wondering why their sleds were breaking down and had to be into the shop until I asked. Someone wondered with me if I knew what curling was, and I'm like, doesn't every girl curl their hair? But I never heard of curling the sport before, and learning and watching some of the youth participate in that was just lovely. I do remember that first winter, how cold it was and how I did need all the winter gear. I had a grain shovel that I brought up from the farm, and I really needed a snow shovel, and so a congregation member blessed me with one of those too. Of course, in those early years, I met Chad, and we got to go out on some dates. And I remember on my birthday, May 14th, my first year here, that it snowed. And I called my mom and dad, and I said, I do not know where I moved to. I cannot believe it was snowing. And by the time I got home, Chad had already used my snow shovel and shoveled out my driveway so that I could park. One of the most memorable times in that first year was 9/11. That was my first full day of work. It was a Tuesday. We were having our first staff meeting, and I remember the phone ringing over and over and over again. And finally took a break and went to the bathroom. And the ladies in the library, when it was back by the bathrooms, told me that a plane had crashed into the Twin Towers. And it ended up that it was my mom calling because my brother worked in the Pentagon, and by then the plane had crashed there too. It was a long, sobering day, and I remember thinking I wasn't prepared for a natural disaster like this to happen. And I told my mom, I'm going to pack my bags, I'll come home. I have this need to be around family. But instead, a pastor from my internship called out in Connecticut, and we talked about people who work downtown in New York. And I told him that I was planning to resign and pack my bags, and he said, Genelle, no one has been prepared for this. Go and share your story. Go and share your heart with the people you are called to serve, and you will get through this time. And it was really transformational. My first confirmation with the 8th grade students way back then in 2001 was just talking about where God was in a natural tragedy like this. And that really solidified those relationships. I'm still in relationship with many of you that were in that first confirmation class. It was a very special time for me to dig deep and talk about why we are Lutheran Christians, and you introducing this congregation to statements of faith and so many great milestones. It is my great honor to walk beside you still, many of you at your weddings and baptism of babies, and I'm so grateful for those early years. You shaped me into the pastor that I know myself to be today, Pastor Genelle, and I can't thank you enough for risking back in 2001, calling me to be your associate pastor, and for all the memories that we shared in those early years. Some first impressions of being here at Calvary. This building was a place that many things happened during the day. That has been the history the whole 20 years I've been here. In the back of our original building, Adult Day Service met here every day, and April Maddox was the director here, and she was just a wonderful leader. And of course, our preschool, Kathy Shea was our preschool director, and they were also housed in the back, and the interaction between the intergenerations was just lovely. Every time I went to the kitchen, I got to stop and talk to somebody in some other generation than me, and that was quite a blessing. What a gift Calvary's building has been to people all throughout this time. I remember arriving here and learning that on staff, if you wanted to work on a computer, you had to bring your own. So I went out and bought a computer and a printer, and remember bringing it in and booting it up and working on it. We had one phone line back then and lots of sticky notes floating around. And to think back to the efficiency where we are today with being on the cloud and everything, so much has changed in these 20 years. But I'm grateful for those beginnings to really appreciate what we have today. In those early years, I was able to tell the congregation that I lacked in cooking skills. I don't know if I missed the class, if I don't have the DNA, I'm not sure, but life hasn't improved much in that area over the 20 years being with you. There were many jokes about the lack of my cooking skills, and it often made sermons and children's sermons and announcements. And I thank you for all the gifts of the laughter, as well as the recipes, the simple recipes, and learning how to cook new ways. I remember someone asking me if I wanted a sloppy joe, and we called them follow burgers at home, and in college people called them made rights. And I remember just learning all of the new foods. I was given these potato tortillas when I arrived here too, and I remember them being in my fridge, and when I tried to roll it up with some refried beans, I was like, I don't understand why people love these so much. Later to find out it was lefse that I was ruining by my refried beans, and all I needed was a little butter and sugar. Chad taught me those things. But my cooking skills have been a part of me sharing genuinely who I am, and I don't have every skill set even though I'm a pastor, and I thank you for all the memories with my cooking and lack thereof. I have so many memories in the early years of worship bloopers. I can't even tell you how many times I thought my bloopers in worship would get me fired. One comes to mind that I had worn my stole inside out and I didn't notice, and it wasn't until communion that somebody came, and when I was giving them bread, they were reaching forward to flip my stole over. I just thought, oh my gosh, I don't even know how to dress myself. I remember another time sharing the words of institution, and I ended up, as I was looking out to the congregation, saw somebody I really wanted to connect with, and I totally lost my place. And as the congregation could see that I paused and didn't know where I was, somebody started blurting out the words, and it caught me up to speed, and I said them along with them. And I was so grateful for that time and that grace, and I thought again, my goodness, I can't even get the words of institution straight around here. I'm not sure if they're going to keep me. I remember too at one worship service that as I was reading the scripture, I was mispronouncing names, and I remember sharing after that my confirmation teacher in my home church had said, if you don't know a name, say the first letter and then say it the rest of the words fast. And I shared that after butchering all these names of the Bible, and again just thinking, gosh, if I don't know how to pronounce these names, how am I modeling this for others? But again, those early years and all the grace you gave me, I was genuinely myself, and I'm glad you could see me as your pastor.
Hi, I'm Kevin Cease, and I have a couple of memories of the one and the only Reverend Genelle Genkhanger Netland. I'll never forget the day that we were interviewing her with the call committee. She presented herself with such love and compassion and just absolute brilliance that she just shone as far as who she was. And I remember being with the rest of the call committee afterwards as we were discussing and just saying, I don't think we have to do anything more. This is somebody that will be such a good fit for Calvary that can help us do everything that we can imagine for the future. And she was just so amazing in her interview. We just couldn't even believe that we would be so lucky to have the ability to call her. And we did, and she accepted. And so 20 years later, here we are. And I remember her moving into this little itty bitty house. It wasn't much bigger than a dog house. And of course, she didn't know anything better. It was just down on Minnesota Avenue there, And it was just such a cute little Genelle house. It couldn't have been smaller. But if you think about it, it was very practical. And Genelle is a very practical person. She will always tell you what the most pragmatic and sensible and reasonable solution is. She always comes up with the simplest but most loving and caring way of looking at things. And so I would imagine that house kind of fit her too, because it was pragmatic. And we, over the years, have been so lucky just to experience her in all of her Genelle ways. She is called and ordained, and I know that ordination ceremony was pretty darn special in Ankeny 20 years ago. And as a result, our called and ordained pastor now has been leading us in worship. She's been marrying us, and I can speak to taking care of the people that have passed away, the people who have died. And she does a beautiful job of saying goodbye to them. But most importantly, she is so wonderful in funerals. She has supported our congregation over the last 20 years in saying goodbye to our most special people that we have ever known and loved. And she does it with the utmost compassion, and the level of the way that she takes care of our families is just unparalleled. We're so blessed to have Genelle. And so I wish for you another beautiful day, because that's all we get is a day each. And may we be blessed by having her on this day.
Genelle, hello, Peter here. First thought was, I couldn't remember your maiden name. That's how you're just so smooth into it. You're always Pastor Genelle when I met you, because when we went through the interview process of meeting you, it was like, whoa, we can't let her leave. And the first impression is, after several discussions, or you answering several questions, is that you had an old soul. That's how you got to me. It's like, ooh. And I remember I asked you a couple questions. I can't even remember what they were right away, but you responded to me directly, and it was like we had a personal conversation amongst the group during the interview. And then when you left the room, everyone said, ooh, that's the best person I've interviewed, and you were the top of the person I've ever interviewed, and I haven't been in that many. But our leader of the pack, which was Tom at the time, I believe, he said you were the top 5 of over 250 interviews, and that's how much you impressed us. And we just felt we couldn't let you go, and we didn't. And I think in turnaround, I think you felt very comfortable with your visit, and we just enjoyed having you come. And the rest moves on, where what was Genelle about? Genelle's about being able to hug anybody, didn't matter, old, young, man, husband, wife. You were just inviting, you shared everything, and people felt comfortable coming to you. And that's one thing I appreciated. And that old soul, and I think I've even told you that before, but if not, that was my first impression. Because you were, I think, believe you were 28 when you first came, and we all get older, but you came with that already experienced nature. Moving on, you were always there for my family, my kids growing up. You made sure things happened in the church, and we just appreciated that. We enjoyed your music, your voice, and the ease of which you commanded up front, good humor. When you did make a mistake, you just off the cuff made a joyful joke or something, and you lightened the crowd. And it was it was a very charming way to get to know Genelle. And then my daughter gets older, and she goes, Why does she have to work? She only works Wednesdays and Sundays, as you remember us saying to you. And the day that you wore the slippers, that was a very neat day for my daughter to pick up on. So we enjoyed the sermons. You just always seem to go from the heart of things, but you did it in so many different ways. And the other thing that we appreciated from afar was the baptisms that you did, how you brought up everybody, all the kids, and made them a very sharing part of the communion, and we appreciated that. Move on into confirmation, because Sandy took over. She was doing all the Sunday school at the time. Then when our kids got in confirmation, she said it was my turn, so I got to be with you. And of course, Paul Iverson said, "Oh, it'll be fun for you," and because he was always talking about, they always had kind of a bouncer type mentality, a few of them. And you and Hans put me in a bouncer role a little bit, so you gave me some tough classes and used my background and my former job to utilize and nurture some people along the way in my 5 years of working confirmation. So sometimes I appreciated that, sometimes not. So I was glad Sandy joined me a few times to help soften it up, but I was always there to, if something needed to be talked to sternly or softly or use my abilities, I was there to help as much as possible, and both you and Hans threw me in there. Then Pastor Steve, one of the best things that he did was he took that Steve on a stick, and Kyle just enjoyed that because I took that into my class one time, and I know this isn't about you at the moment, but it was part of the whole process, and it was the best the class ever was that day. And I had a rambunctious crew, but I enjoyed you putting me in spots and kind of letting me expand with the children, young adults, basically. That was fun that you allowed me to participate with your guidance. So we just appreciate you very much. And lo and behold, we will see you in a couple months. Can't think of much else. Just appreciate that you're here and you allow me to talk to you here and there. One of the things I did enjoy after you're here about a year and a half or whatever, when we went out to lunch and just bantered back and forth about yourself and how things were going, a little feedback, but it was never a hardcore this or that. We just enjoyed each other's conversation, and I think that's what you're all about, is making people feel real comfortable, and I enjoy that the most from you and your friendship. Thank you.
It was such an honor to be called to be the associate pastor here at Calvary Lutheran Church, and I have so many great memories. Personally, during the years of 2001 to 2009, many of you welcomed my nephew Johnny, who stayed with me during the summers. He was like the star of Vacation Bible School. He stayed in many of your homes and played with your kids when he was up visiting while I worked. We had great times, and Johnny remembers all of you so fondly. This was probably one of the church homes that he would say influenced his faith and shaped him into the man he has been created to be. Of course, Kent and Sherry Minsky introduced me to Chad Netland, and I remember the first time we were going to get together, his mom called and told me that he couldn't meet me for dinner because a cow had prolapsed. I'd never had a date canceled because of a livestock malfunction, and so I had to look up what prolapsed mean, even though I lived on a farm, and it sounded pretty serious. And he called later to reschedule, and it was with Kent and Sherry and Amanda that we went to Keith's Pizza, and Chad and his sister Kylie came, and we met and had pizza. And the seal of the deal was Chad and I going to Home Depot afterwards and shopping for some things, for some projects we wanted to do. You welcomed Chad into this congregation and blessed us with a wonderful wedding reception and good wishes. You also were with us when we welcomed Catherine and welcomed Jake into our lives and made our family. Catherine being 3 weeks late, Jake being 2 weeks early, both born around Easter and Christmas holidays. You'd think I'd be a better planner, but we're so grateful for 2 kids that are healthy and whole, and they are so grateful that Calvary is their church home and how they've grown to get to know God through all of you, and through the many eyes that can watch them. They feel comforted by that, and we're grateful for this being their home too. Many of you remember in those early days that I was somewhat accident prone. I'm going to blame that on working with Pastor Steve Trandom. Every time it fell into a neck brace, it felt like I was into a neck brace right after. Totaling Chad's truck, being in a neck brace, having a cane, pinching a nerve from an old injury, and having back surgery when I was pregnant with Jake. I remember somebody got these chairs out front for us, and I was very pregnant and moving very slowly with that pinched nerve, severed nerve, and I remember sitting down in the chair, and I hadn't turned my microphone off yet, and I realized that I still had another part to do. So I said out loud, "Oh, is it me again?" And my microphone was still on, and of course the whole congregation laughed, and it took time for me to get my momentum up and out of that chair and back in, and those laughter and those moments, you went through all of it with me, and I'm so grateful. We were stationed out of the God Shack for most of my associate pastor later years. No running water, no coffee, but it was a great place to be and really create community on the staff while this building was being remodeled and upgraded. My associate pastor years, though, were some of my favorite years. I love program ministry. You gave me so much room to try new things, new ways to reach out to all generations. Some programs were highly successful and some had a very short lifespan, but I always felt like I had the ability to listen to God where God may be leading us and trying things here. And so faith formation, conversations were able to bloom during those associate pastor years. I loved teaching confirmation. I loved going on the National Youth Gathering trip, mission trips, confirmation retreats, Wacky Wednesdays in the summer. I got the nickname of Reverend Evil, and there's a long story behind that from a confirmation class. I took students down to Luther Seminary. I was constantly planting seeds for future pastors, and if I would always say, if I could do this work, so can you. And I hope many took that to heart. We have started the blessing of the animal service, the motorcycle blessing, so many milestone events we got to play with to really mark where God wanted to meet us. Not as specifically as God meeting us in the sacraments, but still meeting us along life's journeys and milestones. And it was really a rich time. Great memories of doing adult education classes as an associate pastor in the front narthex here until we got so full that we were kind of a fire hazard and it wasn't a welcoming sight for those coming in for the second service. But I was so enriched by that study and those conversations, and I'm so grateful that I had the freedom as an associate pastor to do so much programming and try so many different things that I hope blessed you, because they definitely blessed me.
Well, thanks everyone for this invitation. Genelle has asked me to reflect on her time at the Atlanta National Youth Gathering. My name is Kim Williams, and I am currently the Vice President at Calvary Lutheran Church as a part of Church Council. And so I have known Genelle the entire time that she has been at Calvary, and it's been a really joyful time to have spent with her. So when we reflect on that Atlanta Youth Gathering, those many years ago, some things we need to know. Genelle, when she went on that National Youth Gathering, was literally fresh off of her honeymoon. She and Chad had just gotten back, and the next day she was on a plane to Atlanta. Now, the rest of the Calvary youth and the adult chaperones were, we had taken a bus, so we traveled more ponderously to get there. But the other thing is that Genelle had such little turnaround time that I do recall that she ended up using wedding cash to pay for some things because she didn't have the opportunity to stop by church and get any kind of spending money to support her. So that was kind of interesting and wonderful. Another thing that I recall is that Genelle saying that when she flew into Atlanta, it was on a Sunday, and she was wearing her collar. And she said so many people in the Atlanta airport came up to her and asked for a blessing or asked her to pray with them. And that has always resonated with me. From the perspective of the youth and the gathering, it's all very fun and engaging. But I think when I think about back on that time, having Genelle there brought some leadership for us, that as other adults, we knew how to support kids in this, but her role there really provided that leadership that the kids wanted and craved within our small group from Calvary, in addition to all the great things that were happening at the conference. I think another thing that stands out to me is, and for those of you that have been members of Calvary for a long time, this will date us all, but we cheered because little Sophie Mae Vigasa was born during that Atlanta youth gathering, and Hans was our youth leader at the time, and that's why he could not attend, because Sophie Mae was on the way, expected. And so as a group, we collectively cheered. And again, to give you some sense of how long that has been, I just attended Sophie Mae's high school graduation reception. So time has marched on in a wonderful way. And I think the thing I want to say lastly about that trip is, and this sticks out in my mind so clearly, we were all, the gathering was over, we were heading back to the bus. We had an appointed time to be at the bus, and bus drivers are quite prompt in that regard. And what Genelle did, despite that timeline that we were supposed to keep, was she prayed over each individual that participated, both the students and the adult chaperones, an individual prayer. And as I recall, Kevin C. saying very clearly, Kim, they will never remember that we were late for the bus. They will always remember that prayer. So, and now Genelle comes back from sabbatical, and she does another immediate turnaround, and she goes off on another youth trip. So history repeats itself in a wonderful way. And God's blessings to Genelle.
So here we sit today. When I got an email all those months ago saying we want to talk about some memories for the last 20 years, my brain just went in so many different places. And looking back to those first years, one of my very first memories of Genelle coming to the church was we joined at the same time, because we joined Calvary the same year that you came, Genelle. And one of my first memories is all of a sudden there was this young man in your life, and there was this wedding looming, and we started talking about wedding hair. And so we had a few practice runs, and then the first major event that I remember was doing your hair for your wedding. And that was really special for me, and Emma went with as well. And so we were able to come down to Iowa and enjoy that time and be at your wedding. And then life just happened from there. Johnny would come up in the summer, and he'd come over to the lake and play with the kids. And as I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about today, one of the things that crossed my mind was just the wedding theme and the thought of a wedding, and how being a bride of Christ and all of the things that we've been through together in the church, whether it's been capital appeals or counsel or just me telling you that your hair is glowing on the altar and that we need to touch it up. You know, that would happen too. It happened more times than we care to probably remember. But one of the biggest things for me was that first capital appeal that we all went through, and how it changed the life of the church and how it changed the marriage of the church, in a sense. And also, when the second capital appeal came around, how you so questioned yourself as to whether or not you could do this. And I think back to that, really wasn't that long ago that we finished that capital appeal and finished it in a really positive way. And it kind of mirrors what marriage is. There's change, and you have to grow with that change, and you have to adjust with that change as every marriage has to as well. But that has been an exciting thing for me to see in your 20 years of ministry here at Calvary, is how you have grown and how you have changed and how the church has changed. And right now, we're probably in the midst of one of the biggest changes that Calvary has undergone. And there's so much more yet to come. None of us, of course, know what that is. And it's something that we still, as a team, all have to do together. And so for me, it's just, first of all, thanking you for 20 years of ministry at our location and 20 years of being married to this congregation and leading this congregation and being such a strong force behind what Calvary is and what it has become. So thank you for all of your years. Thank you for all of your hard work, and thank you for your vision. As a marriage evolves, so has the marriage of Calvary to Christ and the church. Um, so we love you and appreciate everything you have done. And congratulations on and blessings on 20 years of ministry.
Well, Genelle, I'm Jim Moldy. I think you know who I am, I think. Anyway, I remember the first time I saw you entering the sanctuary on the east side with Johnny at your side. You were smiling a lot, visiting with folks. That must have been the weekend you were interviewing and visiting here. I did remember talking to Tom Oman on your call committee. Tom mentioned to me that in his years as a school administrator, he'd interviewed hundreds of people, and you were easily in the top 5. And I have no doubt that was the case. It's been a real blessing to have you here. Getting to know Claudia and John, it was easy to see that the apple didn't fall very far from the tree. It was always fun to visit with your dad about eyeball things and glasses in his job as an optician, and I enjoyed that very much. Genelle, I remember the first night we had confirmation. My daughter was an 8th grade confirmand, and I decided to teach confirmation with Paul Iverson. We were both small group leaders. And the first night you taught was the Wednesday after 9/11. And you had a room full of nervous 8th graders and, I'll admit, nervous adults as we contemplated what was happening to our country and the threats we faced. And you handled it so wonderfully. I knew right then that this was the place for you. I've told people over the years, Genelle, that I couldn't imagine you doing anything else with your life. And I still feel that's true. I remember a trip to Camp Amnicon on the youth group, a fun weekend. You and Hunts and myself and some other youth leaders enjoyed our weekend very much. Over the years, Genelle, I remember you confirming my daughter, marrying my children, baptizing my grandchildren. It's been a real blessing to have you in our family's life, and I hope that this will continue for many years to come. I do remember, Genelle, in confirmation that you were often called Pastor Evil because of your very steep grading curve. I believe it was 97% to pass. My daughter still hasn't forgotten that she beat me by 1 point. I got a 96. And to this day, that still haunts me. I don't know what I missed, but I'm not sure you graded my test correctly. Genelle, I just want to say, after 20 years, I don't know where the time has gone, but it's been a blessing to know you, both as my pastor and a friend. Our years on council together and different task forces, it's been a joy. I'm hoping you're here for many years to come. God bless you.
Hi, my name is Paul Iverson, and I've been a member at Calvary Lutheran Church since 1985. I have 3 memories of when Pastor Genelle first came to Calvary. The first was one of her first Sundays, and she was leading children's worship, and she plopped down on the floor with the kids and asked if any of them were new too. And then she talked about how hard it is to be the new person, and at that time I knew she could relate to children. My second memory from that first year was I was doing a talk at Glowing Age which is a group of more mature Calvary members. And Genelle did the devotion for that. And I watched her interact with the seniors that were there and said, you know, she can talk to seniors too. And then my third memory, which is my strongest memory, comes from confirmation. My oldest son, Tony, was in his last year of confirmation, and Genelle was in charge of that grade's confirmation. Our first Wednesday with the kids was on September 12, 2001. And Genelle brought an email she'd gotten from one of her brothers whose job that day was to identify body parts from 9/11. I can still remember parts of that email like it was yesterday. But what I also remember is how Genelle related to the kids. She didn't give them any canned lines or talk about, just any of the things. She said, I don't understand this either. And she let the kids talk about their observations and their fears and their worries, and she made it very real to them. And she had instant success with the kids because of that. So those three instances showed me Genelle's tremendous people skills, which we all know, no matter the age. She is, as you all know, a relational pastor and a very good one. Those three instances also demonstrated to me a person who's very comfortable with who she is. She doesn't have to pretend to be something else to make people like her or to think that she's perfect. As she's shown us many, many times, she is not perfect, right? And every time she shows us that imperfection, it's usually with a laugh and a smile. Over these 20 years, I've worked with Genelle on council and some other projects at church as well. And through that, we've become good friends. And I've watched her grow both as a visionary leader for the church and just as a person. While her greatest strength is still and probably always will be her ability to see Jesus in all people, I've watched her skills in understanding a budget, managing a staff, and sharing a vision grow so that she is now good at everything she does and exceptional at a few things. I'm so thankful for all that she has done for Calvary and for me the last 20 years. So congratulations, Genelle, and only 20 years to go. Thanks.
Well, hello, Genelle. I would like to speak today about when I first met you, when you came as our associate pastor, and I can remember meeting you, and I can remember you having short, very curly hair, and full of a lot of life, and very energetic. And we kind of hooked up with you because mutual friends of ours, Jim and Elaine Haugen, were friends of your mom and dad, John and Claudia. And when Elaine Haugen just knew that you were coming to Calvary, she said, well, I'm going to hook you up with Kent and Sherry Minsky because they'll take good care of you when you go to Calvary. So we've known you for a long time. I do remember one time that you were so hot from the summer heat that I think we had given you a key or showed you where a key was to our house. And when I got home, you were in our air-conditioned house in our jacuzzi having a bath. So maybe you don't remember that, but we remember that. But I guess the best memory I have is how I introduced you to your husband, Chad. And his mother was a paraprofessional in Bagley with me, Carla. And one day, Carla said to me, she said, Sherry, do you know any nice young women for Chad? She said, I just don't want him to be lonely when Larry and I aren't around. I don't want to think of him being lonely. So I said, well, you know, Carla, we do have a new associate pastor at our church. Let me talk to her on Wednesday night because I was teaching confirmation. So I approached you, Genelle, and I asked you, would you be interested in meeting a young man from Bagley? And your response to me was, Sherry, let me pray on that a little bit. So I said, that's fair enough. You let me know. So I went to school the next day, and every other day, Carla, Chad's mom, was asking me, has she said anything to you, Sherry? Has she said anything to you, Sherry? And I kept saying, Carla, no, she hasn't said anything to me yet. And this went on for about probably 3 weeks. And after about 3 weeks, I think I approached you again and I said, Genelle, what have you decided that you'd like to do? Do you want to meet this young man? And she said, yeah, I think we can go for that. So we decided to, and I believe that it was maybe a month later with your schedule at church and Chad's schedule, because it was in the spring and he was calving, that we finally got a chance for you two to meet. So I believe we met at Keith's Pizza by the mall. I did not know Chad, but I knew his younger sister, Kylie. And so Kylie escorted Chad to Keith's Pizza. And you came in, and it was the whole Minsky family, Kent, me, Adam, and Amanda, that met for dinner that night. And I do remember thinking, they look like they're pretty comfortable with each other, Chad and Genelle. And so we, visited for a while, and then you asked Kent, Kent, I think I need some patio lights for my house so that when I come home at night, when it's dark, I have some light on my sidewalk. So Kent said, well, let's go to Home Depot and buy you some patio lights for your house. So I think either Kent or I asked Chad and Kylie if they wanted to go with us, and sure enough, they wanted to go with us. So we all got in our cars from Keith's Pizza, and we all headed towards Home Depot. And I believe Chad and you were the ones that found the lights. I'm not sure how that happened, but you found patio lights, and we walked out into the parking lot, and it was getting kind of dark, and about 8:39, and I could sense that maybe the two of you wanted some time by yourself. So I said to Kent, well, I think it's time for us to go. So I told Adam and Amanda, now get in the car. And if you know Kent kept visiting a little bit longer in the parking lot. And finally he said, well, I think I'm going to go. So we got in our car and left. And I think the two of you were still chatting in the parking lot. And if I remember right, Genelle, you asked him to come to your house for coffee that night. You'll have to let me know if that's correct. But, and after that, I guess you might say that I didn't have to do anything else. It was just, it was history. You were meant to be with each other. So I'm glad that I could be a part of that. And I don't know. You've been married probably 15? No, it's got to be longer than that because Catherine's 15 years old? 17 years? Something like that. So that's what I remember about you. I've let's see, what else have we done together? You've been at our house several times. Your mom and dad have been at our house several times. You confirmed both of our kids. You married both of our kids. You've baptized our grandchildren, some of our grandchildren. So there's been a long history of many things. That's all I have to say. So thank you for everything. Bye.
Well, now on to the senior pastor years from 2009 to present. What an incredible discernment time it was for me and Chad and our family, as well as you, as we discerned together if I was the right leader for Calvary back in 2009. You saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And after watching senior pastors before me struggle in this role, I wasn't quite sure if this was the right thing for me to move to, but I really wasn't ready to be done at Calvary. And so with your support, with the support of my family, and obviously the support of God, I asked you to give me 3 years to explore if this possibly could work at Calvary. And they have been some of the most formative years of my ministry. In 2009, though, I started ministry similar to like 2001, right after I was installed to be your senior pastor here at Calvary, the ELCA took a bold move that I wasn't expecting and ready for, to approve our homosexual brothers and sisters to be pastors. And this was not necessarily a national change, but it did affect the national church of the ELCA. And so there were many conversations about what Calvary was going to do. What did this mean? It was way before states were even approving gay marriage. And so it took us to a really spot of discernment and communication and leading a lot of forums as a new senior pastor. The other thing that happened the month after that is that my dad died suddenly. And for those of you who got to know my dad, knew that he was just a character. He was a great storyteller, and he was really enamored by life in the Northwoods. My dad and I were just kind of coming into our own adult relationship about church and life and ministry. And I was saddened, obviously. It changed our whole world to have my dad die so suddenly. And that fall, when I was alone as a pastor, too, because we had not called Pastor Andrew yet, I had to run home often to help my mom to sell my dad's business, to think about how to move her forward the best we could. And so, again, just against all odds of personal and professional changes, really was felt very called to try to explore this role of being the senior pastor here at Calvary. My kids were small when I took this call as the senior pastor, and in many ways you helped it make it easier for me, moving council meetings to midweek and moving them up in time so I could try to be home at bedtime to be with my kids. So many roles that you were able to help me modify in order to stay married and to stay a mom too. My kids started preschool in this program, and it was delightful to bring them to work. It was great to go down and have lunch with them, where I was Jake's mom and Katie's mom and not senior pastor. It was really grounding and fun. And anytime you're having a bad day, walking back to that preschool would make your frown turn upside down in a heartbeat. Of course, that year in 2009, we were living into a new building. The preschool was expanding. We were setting new mission and vision goals on how we could be a better outreach to the community. That was exciting and nerve-wracking all at the same time. Hiring staff, getting equipment, trying to vision for what we could do to continue to make faithful disciples and academic leaders. At the same time, we redid our constitution, and we had a major shift from a board-heavy structure here, over 54 elected to a board, to going to a 9-council elected with a ministry team model. So trying to live into what that meant, letting go of some of the old and what did work to some of the new and what we were living into, it was a huge challenge and a great joy. Just incredible leaders that stepped up to help guide me and to resource me. Living into a new building was a great challenge. We knew that God had asked us to build showers and have extra rooms and the gym to broaden our outreach, and man, has that been true. I mean, today this place is a community center, and the building tells a story that God lives here. Through the walls, through the artwork, through the way that this building is structured. So even if there's no people around to tell them that God loves them, I think this building communicates that. And so it is a great privilege to be a community pastor, being in this place and knowing that God has a lot more in store for us. So part of my role as a senior pastor is trying to build a staff team that I think could serve us well. We hadn't grown really in worship numbers, but we were growing in outreach, the people that we were reaching in the community. And we were learning kind of early on that people in the pews were not the only people we were called to minister to. And so part of the task was developing a team. I got to a network of senior pastors that welcomed me. I serve on the executive team still for that conference. People that could shepherd me and teach me some of the skills and point me to resources, and that was super helpful. Building a staff, building expectations, and it has been a great joy to work with the people that God has given me to work with here on the staff, and I hope they feel the same about me. I started second offerings as your senior pastor, a time that we could really focus some offerings that make a deeper impact. And I started as part of what I thought was yearly themes, so that we could kind of hang our hat as our staff expanded, and how we could communicate what we were trying to accomplish in God's leading. And those yearly themes have been great ways for us to kind of row in the same boat together. And not everything hangs on those themes, that I think it helped guide us in those early years. In my senior pastor years, Servants of Shelter was something that we were able to provide, and I was really honored that we could do some of that work. Hard work, definitely some hard work, some challenging work, but I think important work in our Bemidji community. Faith in Action was something that started in my senior pastor years, that again I wasn't leading or part of, but really proud that my staff was able to envision how we could really be beacons of light in the community, and that's still going strong today. This and sabbatical will be the third time I've led a strategic plan or been a part of a strategic plan, and that has been really fruitful time of really listening to you, and where I believe the Holy Spirit is also dwelling and working, and then reflecting back on how I can design a budget and the staffing to be able to do the things that you feel that God is calling us to do in the future years. Probably some of the hardest work that I did was a capital appeal, and I learned a lot about myself. It was a spiritually renewing time for me to really be leaning on God and talking to God more frequently. And for the first round, first time doing something, I think it was a successful campaign. I learned a lot and would do some things differently if I was ever asked to do that again. But that was some incredibly humbling, hard work. But it really helped get us to a different place at Calvary, and I'm grateful that God gave me the strength and you believed in me enough to lead us through something like that. I guess the last big milestone as a senior pastor was being recognized for my leadership abilities and being asked to run for bishop, which of course I said no to, like I do in all call processes. And the Spirit kept working on me, and through that process of trying to envision my skill set being used in a different way, on a different level, on a different scale, that was an incredible time to discern. And as much as it rocked me to think about missing out on congregational life, and specifically with all of you, I thank you for the time and space to discern that. I think God sorted that out just as God should have. And yet, in these senior pastor years, I've been able to do some work, really using my skill set to help rostered leaders and to find new pastors and lay leaders to be leading congregations up here in a synod that I know well and I love. And so I think that all worked out for good. But again, I thank you for these years of time to discern. This is my third sabbatical, and I'm grateful for the time to renew and reflect and recharge. This time is particularly different, though, because I applied for a Lilly grant and received one. So we were able to receive some money to support us during this time, to launch us, to give us some different tools for this time of sabbatical. And for that, I'm really grateful. I applied for the sabbatical funding before COVID was even a twinkle in our eyes. And so thank you for your adaptation, your flexibility. In some ways, it's not great timing, as we're just starting to reopen and lean into summer, that I would be stepping aside. But I do think that God's timing is perfect timing, and I promise that I will renew and reflect and be a stronger leader as I return. So there's some up-to-date things that I remember and reflect about being your senior pastor.
Hi, I'd like to tell you a little bit about how I was led to tell Calvary about Genelle being the perfect pastor for the congregation. Alice and I had been with Calvary for almost 60 years at this time. Alice and I came to church. We entered the church by the back door, and somebody told us that Pastor Genelle was interested in our senior position, and I had this overwhelming sense that I was to tell Pastor Genelle and Chad that I had this overwhelming sense that she was meant to be our pastor. And so anyway, I knew that I was to tell Chad. I had this strong urge to tell Chad that Genelle was meant to be the pastor. And so I went into the fellowship hall, and sure enough, there was Chad sitting at the table, right, looking at the door that I came in, all by himself. And I told him that I had this strong urging from the Holy Spirit to say that Genelle was meant to be Calvary's pastor, and that I was led to tell you, Chad, that was the case. So I did. As I mentioned, Alice and I had been at Calvary for almost 60 years, and take-home story is that pastors don't come any better than Pastor Genelle Netland. So Calvary has been blessed these years with Pastor Genelle, and I know our family has been blessed time and time again. And we thank you, Genelle, for being a blessing, and many, many years of service to our God and at Calvary. And thank you for that. Amen. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Mary Allen, and I was the congregational president when Pastor Genelle was called to be our senior pastor. It was probably the most important work that we did as a consul when I was president. We knew that she could do a good job, and we expected it, and she certainly has proved that that was the case. Probably one of the things that she worked on early in her senior pastor time is the creation of support teams for the pastors. A support team is a group of usually 3 to 5 people who periodically meet together with the pastor to help talk over things with them, to support them, to encourage them, and just to be their support. I've been on our support team now since it began. And she does encourage all pastors and interns to have a support team. One of the more difficult situations that Pastor Genelle had to face in her first year as senior pastor was the ELCA vote in 2009. The congregation had a difficult time with it, and Pastor Genelle proved to be a strong leader in that situation. There were a few other things that occurred, some of which the SOS program started being worked at Calvary. We adopted a new, different constitution and a change in board structure during that time. And of course, the building was finished and it was open to lots of different uses. Pastor Genelle has proved to us to be an extremely good leader, has worked hard for us, and has done an excellent job, just as we had expected her to when we first called her. And we thank her for all her work.
Hi, I'm Bethany Wesley. I've been the president of the council here at Calvary for the last 2.5 years, and I served on the council for about a year or so before that. So I'm going to talk about some of the more recent experiences that Pastor Genelle has had here at Calvary. But before we did, I wanted to share a little story kind of about those 6 degrees and how we're separated by people. I first moved to Bemidji in 2007. I rented an apartment out past the state park. So when it came time to finding a church, I was attending First Lutheran because that other ELCA church was way on the other side of town. My mother, who had never been to Bemidji other than that weekend to help move me in, kept telling me that I had chosen the wrong church. That there was a church on the other side of town with a female pastor who was very good friends with the woman who babysat me when I was a child. I was a brat as a child. When this babysitter would come take care of me, I would sit under the dining room table, pretend to be a cat, refuse to speak English, and just meow and hiss at everybody. The idea of marrying my obnoxious childhood behaviors with my church-going experience did not appeal to me at all. So I ignored my mother. Had my first child, she was baptized at First Lutheran. As she approached her preschool years, though, we learned very quickly she was sensitive, yet spirited, and it made sense to keep her in as calm and normal and familiar surroundings as we could. So we enrolled her at Calvary's preschool and began attending Calvary. From the minute we walked into Calvary's church, we knew it was a different feel. We knew we felt more comfortable here than we did at First Lutheran. That was just our experience. And so it definitely was the right decision. It took us a few years, but it was the right decision. The moral of the story, of course, is that mothers are always right, and that you should always be kind to your babysitters because it will haunt you for the rest of your life. A few years ago, when I was on the vision team for Calvary, Pastor Genelle gave us all cat headbands. We were to walk around church with kitty heads, kind of as a joke and an incentive and a reminder to take the CAT, the congregational assessment tool. She has no idea how hard I laughed and how that brought my life kind of full circle. So that is my 6 degrees of separation from Pastor Genelle, and it still makes me laugh. I'm taping this here on the Virgin Memorial Weekend, so Pastor Genelle is approaching, I believe, the halfway point in her sabbatical. We just recently clawed our way through our first meeting without her, with a lot of help, of course, from Pastor Jeremiah and the staff. But we're getting through it. We miss her, but we hope she's enjoying her time away. As president in the last 2.5 years, as council before that, I really have had a bird's eye view in terms of what Pastor Genelle faces on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. I've seen her leadership skills in action. And the council have been challenged more than once to face not just what needed to get done for the church, but really making us think hard and deeply about what we value and what we want the church to be. She has been a leader in so many ways, and we just cherish her skills, and we hope that she is truly enjoying her time reflecting and being and exploring. Outside of my time on the council, I would say my most closest experiences with Pastor Genelle have been on the vision team. We were a wide variety of people in terms of age, demographics, values, priorities, and she really led that team forward, culminated in, I believe, January 2019 with our new mission, our vision, our course values, and our strategic priorities. It really forced us. We thought, there were some of us that thought, well, this is a slam dunk, mission trips are our thing, children and families are our thing. And then you'd have other members who really kind of spoke up and said, well, what about this and what about that? And you find that Calvary is so many different things to so many people. How are you supposed to kind of encapsulate that into one document, into one kind of set of core values? Pastor Genelle really led that forward, and she endured 20-minute debates about the Oxford comma. It was quite the experience, but it was a great time. Little did we know that all this blood, sweat, and tears that we put into this beautiful document that was going to propel us forward with values and missions and goals and strategic priorities. They were supposed to go through 2021. Obviously, we had no idea then what the world had in store for us, for the world, for everybody. So it was a good experience. Probably didn't come quite together in action the way we expected, but we all learned. I worked with Genelle over 1.5 years ago now, because it was before COVID. to put together the grant proposal that is funding her sabbatical, so the Lilly Grant. And I remember thinking at the time, as we put together this plan and kind of crafted out what it would consist of for her to look back on 20 years in pastoral ministry, all at one church. Like, I don't think you can understand how rare that is for somebody to serve their entire pastoral career at one church, in varying roles, of course, but at one church. But I remember thinking then how the timing was so ideal because she had just gone through the campaign for bishop. We had just gotten through the Pastor Andrew leaving. There was so much in my mind then, like, what a perfect time for a break. Never knowing, of course, that in just a few weeks, months, whatever that timing was, that we'd learn this term COVID and everything would change. You know, I know I wrote recently about it, but it's like we went from meeting in masks to not meeting at all and meeting over Zoom, having to reassess and basically reconfigure what preschool was, eventually closing down the church building, and yet trying to find a way to keep the church, the work of the church, going. And Pastor Genelle had to bear the brunt of it. Yes, we have an amazing staff and everybody did amazing work, but as the leader, she was the one who really had to carry out plans, put them in action, answer everybody's questions, not to mention emotionally pastor and be there for people going through what is literally an unimaginable time. I remember if she said it once, she said it 100 times. Seminary did not prepare us to pastor during a pandemic. She may have not shown it. She may not have publicly broken much. But I know that the past 16 months have been wearing. I know that it has brought her to the brink a couple of times, if not more than, probably more than what I even know myself. We closed the church. We went online with worship, with programming. Donations dwindled. We're relying on grants and loans and anything we can find just to keep the wheels on the bus. And yet, meanwhile, she's taping worship sermons, you know, trying to keep us all going and trying to help build us up. You know, I've been asked more than once as president, and I'm sure the council has as well, is this the right time? Why are we letting her go on sabbatical now? Isn't this the time where we all need to come back, where we need to kind of regroup and reset for what's to come? The easy answer is, of course, hey, we got this amazing Lilly grant, and of course we need to go now because it's funded by somebody else. Trust me, based on our budget, that is the right answer. Like, outside funding, great. That said, it's more than that. It's also knowing that it's the perfect time for her to step back, for us to step back, to look at what we've been, to regroup, to look toward tomorrow, and strategize for that. So, I don't know. Those are my ramblings for today. I think, speaking for myself, hopefully for the full of the council, we're just so blessed to have Pastor Genelle, and we appreciate the service that she's done, the leadership she's given us, and we just look forward to growing into this next stage right alongside with her.
Hi, Genelle. This is Sandy Oman, and Doug and I are here to talk about you and to wish you a happy 20th anniversary at this church at Calvary. I'm going to talk for just a few minutes and give you my impression of who you are, and then Doug is going to talk a little bit longer because he has more to say. The first time that Doug and I ever met you was when you married David and Jana Schultz. And I'd never been in the church before, and I walked in and saw the beautiful sanctuary, and there you were, conducting the ceremony for them. And what I noticed about you was how charismatic you were, and how you just reflected God's love. Thought you were a beautiful person physically, and you were so confident. And what you said to Jana and David was very meaningful about marriage. And that got me to thinking that this probably would be a church that we would want to come to. Although we were born and always Presbyterian, we decided to become a Lutheran. And we're really glad we did. We've had many, many wonderful years at this church. I love singing in the choir with Shar and meaningful times we had when we had our little concerts, and how much they meant to you too. Some of the things that I noticed over the years was the confirmation classes and how meaningful they were. And when I'd come on Wednesday nights to choir practice, I'd see all the children, and that made me just happy that the next generation could be Christian people, because this church provided a wonderful program for them. It's apparent that you love God, and it's apparent that you love children. I know you're a very sensitive person, but you're very kind. And we're just glad that we had you in our life for many years. You deserve everything you're getting. You deserve the love of your congregation. And I just hope you'll pat yourself on the back, sit down, and just be happy for what you've done and the many people that you have helped over the years and how much God has blessed you. Now I'm going to turn it over to Doug and let him talk a little bit more.
You know, I have talked about a lot of things for a lot of hours, Genelle, and that's been one of the just highlights of my life. And you're well aware of many of the things that I have done, and to have you fit into that as one of the special experiences has been wonderful, and I've shared that with Sandy many times. So I think I'll start just quickly with a little bit of kind of a fun memory, and I think you have remembered that too, because we had never been a Lutheran before. I said, the only way I'm going to maybe be a Lutheran is I have to talk to the pastor first. And I set up a meeting that I got to be with you so I could ask questions and those kinds of things, even though we had been coming to the church for a few times and we'd signed up for a couple of things. And we sat down and I said, I want to talk about becoming a member. And I'll never forget it. She looks down at whatever she had in front of her and said, big smile on her your face, and you said, oh, says here you and Sandy are already members. I said, holy cow, this is how Calvary gets members. You don't even have to. And anyway, it was funny, and I know you remember that. I know you did, and because of that start, we had a lot of very wonderful visits and experiences after that. I mentioned a couple of things that were meaningful, and I was very surprised and honored when you asked me to be a part of the council at a very tough period of time when the church was changing and the financial challenges. It was quite an experience for me to be with that council and going to the retreat and learning some of those things and hearing your vision during this challenging time. And then to have I still look at it as a compliment, I think, that instead of staying on the council, you asked if I would be part of your pastor support group, which wonderful meetings together, the three other people and I meeting with you once a month for several years. Those conversations were always so darn important because we knew more what you were really facing on a day-to-day. That's what it was for. That's what it was for. And I thank you for that opportunity to be a part of that with you. You asked me to help kind of reorganize the endowment, and that was another nice challenge that I think got it in place, and I know now it's working fairly smoothly, and I know there's a lot of room for growth, but I think it's in place to work, and that was after your encouragement and asking for help, and we gave that to you. The part that I'll never, never, ever forget is when we started the process to identify needs and direction of the church because of the need for a capital campaign. Visits we had on how we were going to do that, and then to be part of that and interviewing these different groups, and oh my gosh, what a time and what a challenge. I mean, I think at that time the debt was $3 million, and that's a lot for any church, but a church this size was probably way too much. And we go through all this work and all these interviews, and we talked many times, and you were starting to go towards saving $40,000 to $50,000 on expenses on hiring an outside firm, so it would save the church that. And you were sure you could get it done and be a part, have help, of course, but I remember the many times, as nice as I could, I cautioned you at taking that role. That can be an absolute killer and no win, and a pastor leaving the church. And you still did it, and you did it with God's power and God's grace, and it was amazing. And all the times that we worked on that together, and the success of lowering that debt, roughly $1 million, is really a compliment to you and your faith and just determination. And I know you recall the many times when you about had it, and I said, the one thing we're forgetting now, Genelle, is we got to get back to prayer. You'd have tears in your eyes, and you'd say, you're right, Doug. We're going on the world looking at it, we're forgetting about prayer, and we go back to prayer, and there's almost a miracle happen every time, and we could never figure out, but the only explanation was the power of prayer, and that God was with the process. So it was a great experience for me, and we became exceptional friends, very exceptional friends. I don't know where Calvary would be right now without that successful campaign. And so, congratulations on that. The last thing I think I'll mention is probably the final compliment, because we were starting to spend more time in Florida and not be a part of the church as much, and I had to say, Genelle, I can't be doing some of these things with you when I'm not here all the time. I might give bad advice, and I have to know what I'm talking about when we have these discussions. And that was very hard on me, but I knew it was the right thing to do when I'm not here all the time. It was one of the hardest parts of my life when I had to back off. But the final thing you asked for a little help on is when you took this great challenge of looking at being the bishop of this synod. And we had quite the conversations before you made the decision, and quite the decisions during the process. I will not forget that. The thing that we both agreed on when you did that is that you would stick to your guns at what you would be and what you would do if you were elected. And that's a hard thing to do. And you started to see that the couple days of the actual vote, that you could have started changing. And altering and all that, and you didn't. I am very proud of you, how strong you were and how you did that. And in many ways, not all, in many ways, I think it probably was best that you didn't win that election. But you'll never know that. But you can really look that you did it the right way and you stayed strong. And you stayed with the power of prayer. So thank you, Genelle, and thank you for the good times when you and your kids came out to the lake and spent time in the water, and Chad and Jake out fishing. And so you're always welcome. You'll always be welcome. I hope you'll come and visit Sandy and I in Florida. So thank you, Genelle. Congratulations.
So one of the great privileges of living in a community for 20 years is being involved in things outside the church. And I wear my Calvary shirt for this segment too, because everywhere I go, I feel like I represent God and I represent the church that I've been called to serve. So over the years, I've been able to volunteer for a variety of different things and been asked to do things like invocations at Relay for Life, all the way to in-city memorial things that are going on, saying a prayer or a blessing, Eagle Scout Awards, anniversary prayers, blessing of new buildings being built. So many things in the community that really blessed me. I coached my daughter's volleyball team for many years, and getting to know the girls and the families through that was just a real joy and a real gift and blessing. I've been a parent volunteer with my son's hockey team all through the years that he has done, knowing that Sundays are a little limiting for me to be active, but they worked around my schedule and I did what I could to help him too. Of course, Hockey Day Minnesota was a big thing that Calvary was able to be a part of, and it was great being a part of that team. I really enjoyed volunteering in my kids' schools and getting to know their teachers and the staff at all those places. I have served on a variety of different boards for short periods of time and for long periods of time. It's been a great gift to be involved in Lutheran Campus Ministry, a place that kind of shaped me in my calling, and to welcome now this year Emily Papke Larson, who was a youth when I came, and just how life has just blossomed so much for me, and watching how God works has just really been a gift. I'm a part of the conference pastors meetings here, and it's been a great joy to get to know. I'm kind of one of the old ones that have been around a long time now, but what a wonderful group of pastor leaders and word and service leaders, deacons that we have here, and it's really been a joy. I served through our Synod Candidacy Committee for many years. I chaired that committee for many years, and it was really great to start seeing future leaders of our church. The church is in good hands. And, you know, this ebbs and flows. Sometimes there's a lot of people interested in studying theology, and sometimes there isn't. And so it was great to talk to people about faith and help them through, mentoring them through, and that was a great joy. I stopped that role when I became on the Synod staff, but that community work beyond Calvary was really fulfilling, and I really, really enjoyed it. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a part of the executive team for the larger church conference. I led the conference one year, and Reggie McNeil was our guest speaker, and putting together worship services and speakers and activities and all that stuff at a different location was really challenging, but a really great gift. And again, this network of pastors have been just super. I was asked to be on staff out at United Lutheran Seminary, and I was a cohort leader for people who were training, feeling like they were called to become a senior pastor. And because I lived that, they had asked me to join them. And the cohort of pastors that I work with are incredible pastors, and I don't know if I gift them as much as they gift me. But a great gift to the larger church of being asked to be in those roles. as a woman in leadership, doing some of the things that I've been able to do through Calvary here. It's been a joy to share my story and how I find resources and strength to continue to do this meaningful work. So that has been a great gift. All of our second offering ministry partners that I've gotten to know over the years, I just can't even go into name all of them. They have just really inspired me. They are the extension of the church. When I think back to where my grandparents grew up in a church where they were the food shelf and they were the Boys and Girls Club and they were the United Way and they were the homeless shelter, to think that now we have found a way to say this is God's work, but it's not all happening in the church building anymore, I think is a real gift. We're able to serve a lot more people today because of that partnership, and I'm really grateful for all the second offering ministry partners that we've had over the years. They have blessed me and taught me so much, and I thank them for the opportunity to be in partnership with us too. So many ways that I've been able to serve this Bemidji community near and far, through the church, outside of the church, and it has been my great joy to be Genelle in representing God in what I've been called to do. So for this last time with you, I've been asked to just share my hopes and dreams for us as Calvary Lutheran Church, and there were so many I needed to write them down. So bear with me as I share a few of my hopes and dreams and thoughts. When I think back on my 20 years of walking along beside you, sometimes in front of you, sometimes behind you, sometimes beside you, I just feel really blessed. And to think that we have been presented with a huge challenge here with COVID-19 and national, global pandemic. Here as I step away and come back, we have a lot of things to dig deep and decide together. I do think that 9/11, the ELCA vote, my dad dying, all of the changes that and challenges that we have faced have prepared me for a time such as this. What is it going to mean to be a hybrid church? How are we going to reach people where they are? How is God using this time to refine us in what churches need to be in the communities where we dwell and live? I think these are all fascinating questions, and I do think that God knew what God was doing when this was a global pandemic, because if it wasn't global, I think our desire would be to escape and find a place that we could be back in control and doing things the way we wanted to do them. And instead, God is refining all of us at the same time to really think about how God is at work in our daily lives and in our businesses and in our family life and in our communities. And so I think that'll be a major hope and dream moving forward. I also think about this 40 acres that our forefathers and mothers blessed us with, being out here on this side of town. 4 lanes of highway, 5 lanes right in front of here, 4 out on Highway 2. Changes being made in our community, both with the campground and Value Smart. And what are you calling us to do, Lord? How can we use this land to bless and honor you? I think these are questions that I want to explore and dream about with you. I pray that we can be financially solvent. I think another thing that has always been kind of a teetering thing is really how to do stewardship well as far as financial giving. And I wonder about that, and I dream about that, and I invite you into that dream with me. What would it take for us to have a giving level that we wouldn't have to have these separate campaigns that kind of hop along or fill the gaps? What would that take? What kind of leadership do we need in order to get financially solvent, so that it doesn't feel like every time we're turning around it sounds like more money is needed or being asked for? One of the dreams I have is to have a 3-month reserve set aside so that we don't have another financial crisis. And we're almost to the 1-month reserve, and I almost feel at peace with that. But I think dreaming further about that, wondering about how we can use those reserves to be financially solvent in the future are some things I wanted to dream with you. Being an anchor church is something that is a term that's been around. Being a larger church with some resources, how we can support the smaller rural churches that are around us, what programs and resources can we expand on. I think that we have explored this a little bit in partnership with Ardal. We've partnered a little bit with Malvik. But maybe God is calling us to a deeper level, a deeper scale. And what could Calvary let go of that smaller churches can do and do well? I think those are things I'd like to dream with you about to see if God comes up with anything. Solar panel gardens I have here, an Academy of Hope with Pastor Andrew left with that vision. What could that mean and look like? And I'm grateful that I can dream with you, that I have the time to do that, the energy to do that as we discern what God is calling us to do, be, and become in the future.